The members of the 2023-2024 NFL Draft are officially about to end their rookie seasons, and while some players have been phenomenal this year, some of them have been just okay. So in today's video, I want to do part 2 of grading the rookies. If you haven't already checked out my part 1, I'll have it pinned up at the very end, so make sure you check that out after this video. In this video, we're going to be starting out with pick number 15 and going all the way to number 1. So without further ado, let's get into it. Before I get to my rankings, I do want to clarify, I'm recording this on Saturday, December 23rd, so if any of these players have a breakout game in their upcoming week, I'm sorry, I'll make an edit in the comment section below, so just keep that in mind when I'm giving you guys the stats and some synopsis of the players. So at number 15, the New York Jets selected Will McDonald IV, the edge rusher out of Iowa State. Now this was a pick that was a little bit shocking at the time because Will McDonald was seen as either a late first or a very early second round pick. Not many people thought he would go in the middle of the first round, and to be honest with you, I don't think it was that great of a pick. In a limited amount of snaps, he only has 6 solo tackles, 2 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. And for a rookie, those stats are pretty mediocre, especially when you're talking about a first-round pick. Now, this is an undersized player. He only stands at 6'3", 241 pounds, and of course, he's an edge rusher, so typically you want to be around that 260 to 280 range. He was sort of seen as a developmental guy, but also a guy who should be able to come in and instantly make an impact. At Iowa State, he was a monster, but with the New York Jets, he hasn't been that. So with that being said, I'm going to give this pick a C-. Next up with the number 14th overall pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers selected Broderick Jones, the offensive tackle from Georgia. I was very high on this pick because obviously I thought Broderick Jones was a great player, and thus far this year he has been pretty solid for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Is he a Pro Bowl level tackle? Not yet. Can he be? 100%. Now he's coming off arguably one of his worst performances, so it is kind of notching my grade down a little bit, but I'm not going to be too biased because of one game. He's been primarily playing one of the hardest positions in the entire NFL, that left tackle spot, so I got to give him a ton of credit for having a pretty solid rookie season. He currently has a PFF grade of 60.8, but I do think his performance is a lot better than that PFF grade, so I'm going to give this pick a solid B. Next up with the 13th overall pick, the Green Bay Packers selected Lucas Van Ness, the edge rusher from Iowa. Now me personally, I was not a big fan of this pick, not because I don't like Lucas Van Ness, but I just felt like the fit with the Green Bay Packers was just a little weird. I was a big fan of the Packers taking Broderick Jones to be a replacement for a guy like David Bakhtiari, but Lucas Van Ness was the pick nonetheless. And on the season, he has 21 solo tackles, 3 sacks, and 0 forced fumbles, and as time has gone on, he's been getting more and more playing time. This is an extremely young prospect, only being 22 years of age, so I do expect his numbers to be much better in the upcoming seasons. I also think this is a really good developmental pick given the fact that they do have a bunch of older guys already there, so I think this is going to end up being a pretty good pick. I don't think I can give him a super high grade this year, but I do think as the time goes on with him and his development, I think he's going to be a great player, so I'm going to give this pick a solid B. With the 12th overall pick, the Detroit Lions shocked the world and took Jamir Gibbs, the running back out of Alabama. And honestly, I didn't necessarily hate the pick at the time, and I think now that I look back on it, I think it was a good pick. Jamir Gibbs currently has 139 rushes for 792 yards and 7 touchdowns, and he has also been instrumental in the pass game down there in Detroit. You can make an argument that he's actually had the better rookie season than even a guy like Bijan Robinson, even though, well, I'll get to him in a little bit, but I have my own grievances about how he's being used. But nonetheless, he's been very good this year, and right now he has pretty fresh legs come playoff time. He is a big component of this Detroit Lions team, and I think as time goes on, his usage rate is going to get higher and higher and higher. But a big caveat here, he's a running back, and I think they could have taken him a little bit later in the draft had they chosen to draft down a little bit. So while he might be deserving of an A+, I'm going to keep this one at a solid A. Next up, we have the number 11th pick, which was taken by the Tennessee Titans, where they selected Peter Skoronski, the then offensive tackle for Northwestern, but now he is currently playing the left guard position. And I thought this was a great pick for the Tennessee Titans. They obviously had huge offensive line problems, and for them to get a guy who's extremely versatile, whether he could play the tackle position or the guard position, or even at some point, I can imagine him even playing the center position. With that being said, he has definitely not fixed the entire problems for the Tennessee Titans. Their offensive line is abysmal, but it's not because of Peter Skoronski. He is right now probably their best or second best offensive lineman already on their team, and as a rookie, he's been pretty dang good. While he may not have the highest PFF grade, I do think his on-the-field performance is a lot better than what that might say. So for the future and what I think he can be, I definitely do think this is a great pick. So with that being said, I'm going to give this pick a solid B+. Next up with the number 10 overall pick, the Chicago Bears decided to take Darnell Wright, the offensive tackle from Tennessee, and he's had a pretty up and down rookie season. He has basically played every single snap for the Chicago Bears and has only given up 43 total pressures and given up only 7 sacks. Now in comparison to a lot of other tackles and a lot of great offensive guards, that's a pretty high number, but we do have to keep in mind that he is transitioning from a Tennessee offense to the Chicago Bears. And I think thus far this year, he's been one of the better offensive tackles from this draft. And with the Chicago Bears needing to select an offensive lineman in this year's draft, I do think that he might have been the right pick. I still still think Peter Skoronski should have been the pick here though, but that's only because I felt like Darnell Wright was more of a late first round pick and not an early first round pick, whereas I thought Peter Skoronski was basically a guaranteed top 10 pick. So given the value and given everything we know about the two players, I'm going to give this one a slightly lower grade than Peter Skoronski. I'm going to give this pick a B-. Next up, we have the number 9 overall pick, which is going to be Jaylen Carter. A lot of Chicago Bears fans are going to be very mad about how I'm going to grade this pick because honestly, they should have selected Jaylen Carter over Darnell Wright, but I understand they wanted to fix their offensive line problems. But for the Philadelphia Eagles, this is a great pick. Jaylen Carter has been a nice rotational defensive tackle for them, and once Fletcher Cox does decide to retire, Jaylen Carter will step in and be a dominant defensive lineman for many years to come. Will he make Pro Bowls? Probably. Will he be All-Pro? I could see it. The dude has so much talent and so much physicality. I think he's a special talent, and I think this Philadelphia Eagles team needs to rely on him just a little bit more on the defensive side of things. On the year, he has 28 combined tackles and 5 sacks, and for a rotational interior defensive lineman, those are some pretty impressive stats, so I'm going to give this pick an A+. Next up, with the number 8 overall pick, the Atlanta Falcons decided to take Bijan Robinson, the running back from Texas. And I'm going to say one thing here: fire Arthur Smith. Bijan Robinson is one of the best running backs in the entire NFL, yet statistically speaking, he doesn't look like it. And you want to know why? Arthur Smith. On the year, he only has 176 total rushes for 801 yards and 4 total touchdowns. Now, I understand that for the longevity of his career, you want to limit how many rushes he does get, but for him to consistently get less than 15 rushes a game is just ridiculous in my opinion. The fact that Algier and Patterson actually take a lot of his rushes away is just ridiculous. And these past 2 weeks, it just sort of highlighted my frustrations with how they're using Bijan Robinson. But I do think greener pastures are ahead. I don't think Arthur Smith will be the head coach this year, and I also don't think Desmond Ridder is going to be the quarterback. Give this team a Justin Fields or a young rookie stud quarterback and go out there and get Ben Johnson, and everything's going to be fixed. If that's the case, Bijan Robinson is going to average more than 1,400 yards a season and is going to be probably the best running back in the entire NFL. So I can't give this pick an A+ because obviously that production has not been on the field, and like I said earlier with Jamir Gibbs, the value of the running back position is not that high, but I still think he can be a great running back for many years to come, so I'm going to give this pick an A. Next up, with the number 7 overall pick, the Las Vegas Raiders took Tyreek Wilson, the edge rusher from Texas Tech. And thus far this year, it hasn't necessarily translated to great production on the field. Now, Tyreek Wilson was a developmental piece. We all knew this. He was long, lanky, and probably needed to put a little bit of size on him. But I think the majority of us thought that he could at least show some flashes, and I think thus far it's kind of been hit and miss for him. There are certain plays where he looks like a pretty decent edge rusher, but there's also a lot of plays where he just gets bullied by bigger offensive linemen, which should be expected for a young, lanky defensive lineman. On the year, he has 26 combined tackles and 2.5 sacks, and for somebody who was taken in the top 10, I don't think that has been that impressive. But with some more development and learning from a guy like Max Crosby, I do think this guy can turn out to be a very good player, so I'm not going to give this a super low grade, but I'm also not going to give this a super high grade. For now, I'm going to give this pick a solid C, but I definitely do think this pick could eventually be one of the better picks in the draft. Next up, with the number 6 overall pick, the Arizona Cardinals took Paris Johnson Jr., the offensive tackle out of Ohio State, and this was a move to solidify the offensive tackle position to help a guy like Kyler Murray. And similar to Darnell Wright, it's been kind of an up and down season for him, but that was kind of to be expected because we kind of thought Paris Johnson might be a little bit of a developmental guy, and while Paris Johnson has had a total of 922 total snaps, he only has 39 pressures given, but he has given up a total of 8 sacks. So again, for an offensive tackle, I don't think that's that impressive, but when you look at the rest of the offensive tackles from this draft, he stacks up pretty well. I'd make the case that he's probably been the best or maybe second best offensive tackle taken at least in the first round. I like his upside because he's massive and just has some great fluidity with his hips, so I think he could be a very good player for many years to come. If I had to make a comparison of who I think that he could become if he does develop at a good rate, it'd be a guy like Lane Johnson, but that's obviously high praise because Lane Johnson's going to be a Hall of Famer someday. But for Paris Johnson, it's just going to be something where you have to see the development every single year. He has to be better next year than he is this year. So with that being said, I can't give this pick a super high pick, but I will give this pick a solid B. Next up, with the number 5 overall pick, the Seattle Seahawks took Devonte Witherspoon, the cornerback out of Illinois, and I was an absolutely massive fan of this pick. I thought that Devonte Witherspoon would probably be taken around the 10 to 12 range, but him being taken as high as number 5, I was down for it. And I'm kind of a value guy. If I think that I can take somebody later in the draft, I would typically trade down for him, but I don't really hate the fact they took him at the number 5 spot. Even though Christian Gonzalez has had a great rookie season before the injury, I think Devonte Witherspoon has as well. On the year, he has 46 solo tackles, 1 forced fumble, an interception, and 16 pass deflections. And even though that Seattle Seahawks defense has been pretty bad this year, it isn't really necessarily because of Devonte Witherspoon. Has Devon been locked down and been an all-pro level guy? Not quite yet, but can he be that? 100%. He has the fluidity with his hips, the physicality, the hands, the everything that you really want in a cornerback. I just think it's going to take a few more seasons for him to get to that level. But he might win Defensive Rookie of the Year and has arguably been one of the better cornerbacks this season, so I'm going to give this pick an A+. Next up, with the number 4 overall pick, the Indianapolis Colts selected Anthony Richardson, the quarterback out of Florida, and again, I absolutely love this pick for Indianapolis. You pair Shane Steichen, who is a phenomenal head coach and a phenomenal offensive mind, with Anthony Richardson, boom, collision, amazing. And what we saw earlier this year was just that. Now, the one thing that Anthony Richardson has to do better is protecting himself because he got injured many times this year. And as we all know, he's not going to be playing the rest of the season. But in the short time that we did see him, we saw a lot of really good things. He is 1000% the future quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts, and I think he's going to be a great player for many years to come. In fact, I could see him being a top 10 quarterback. With Shane Steichen, he's going to have a Jalen Hurts-like upgrade next year. Just please stay healthy. I'm going to give this pick an A-. Next up with the number 3 overall pick, the Houston Texans traded back up into the first round to select Will Anderson Jr., the edge rusher out of Alabama. Now, I wasn't a huge fan of going up there and taking him in the first round because I thought the value that they got for him was pretty expensive, but for them to make a 1-2 combination with CJ Stroud and Will Anderson made a little bit of sense, and thus far this year, it's worked out for them. Will Anderson Jr. has been one of the better edge rushers the entire season. Now, statistically speaking, he only has 5 sacks, but I think his pressure rate is pretty ridiculous. A lot of the reasons why he's not able to get quarterbacks down is just because he's a rookie and just needs to learn how to tackle a little bit better. I think once he gets better with his pass rushing moves, he's going to get a lot more sacks and will be a consistent 10-sack guy a year. He's going to make Pro Bowls, and I wouldn't be shocked if he makes some All-Pros. He's going to be a great player for many years. Houston needs to continue to work on his hands, his physicality, and his overall total skill set because I think he could be a great player, so I'm going to give this pick an A-. Next up with the number 2 overall pick, the Houston Texans double-dipped with CJ Stroud, the quarterback out of Ohio State, and there's not a lot to be said about this. It's an A+. We're talking about a quarterback who has 3,631 yards, 20 touchdowns, and only 5 interceptions, and had he stayed healthy, could have been the MVP this year. The Texans have their future quarterback and their future edge rusher. It was a spectacular draft for them. So again, an A+ for CJ Stroud. And lastly, with the number 1 overall pick, the Carolina Panthers selected Bryce Young, the quarterback out of Alabama. And thus far this year, it's been pretty hard for him. On the year, he has 2,359 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions, and it really is not his fault for the lack of statistics. Name one good player that's around him outside of Adam Thielen, and even then, Adam Thielen is a shell of what he used to be. The offensive line has regressed, the coaching staff has regressed, everything has regressed, and I just feel so bad for Bryce Young. I think once you give this guy some genuine talent around him, he's going to be a very good player for many years to come. I just think right now it's been very hard for him. He doesn't have the offensive talent around him. He also doesn't have a great defense, and the bad thing is, it's not going to get a ton better because they don't have a first round pick this year. If I was Carolina, if I can somehow get back up into that first round, maybe with the pick 20, 21, 22-ish range, I would definitely do so to try to get Bryce Young some talent around him. This is an absolutely loaded receivers class, so I definitely would love to see them to go out there and get a guy like a Rome Odunze, Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, one of those guys. But if we're just grading him off of his performance this year and what he projects to be, I can't say right now he's anything in the A range. I really want to put him in somewhere in the B range, but I don't think I can do that, so I'm just going to give him for now a C+. But that is going to conclude my grading the rookie series. Again, at the very end of this video, you're going to find the link to part 2, so make sure to check that one out as well. And if you guys agreed with my rankings, make sure to let me know in the comment section below, as well as if you did enjoy the video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button because that would help me out a ton. But I love you guys. Peace.